With a sigh, Andrew turned the radio in his old car off and concentrated on the slowly darkening road in front of his windshield. This sucks, he thought, still shaking his head while his headlights illuminated the potholes in the asphalt. His right front tire hit one, and the bump made him curse. The sun had already set almost half an hour ago, and he still wasn't anywhere close to home. For all he knew, it could take him another hour to get back to his normal route, which would mean he'd pretty much have to fall into bed the moment he got home. No watching TV tonight, no playing games or anything. He groaned as he thought about it. Work was stressful enough as it was. He really needed those uneventful evenings to stay sane. Andrew drove his car around the next blind corner of this backwater road, still waiting for any sign telling him how to get back onto the freeway. And why did they have to close down his way home at all right now? He hadn't seen an accident, not even a single other car on the road since leaving the city behind. Was it something pre-planned? Important roadwork they couldn't push off any longer? No way. He would have seen signs or heard about it from his colleagues. But there had been nothing. Well, at least until he had reached this damn tiny exit ramp and the big yellow sign with an arrow pointing toward it. Andrew couldn't remember seeing it, ever. But the main route had been closed off, so he had steered his car off the freeway and was now following a tiny road through something that was either woods or a swamp. He didn't like it. Not at all. But at least he didn't have to leave his car. Andrew tried to cheer himself up. It didn't help much, or at all. After driving down here for 5 minutes, he couldn't even see the freeway anymore. The only reason he hadn't turned around yet was that there had been no fork in the road. So he was pretty sure that detour would end at the next on-ramp again. It had to, right? He felt doubts creeping up. What if it didn't? Well, the road had to lead somewhere, right? Either to some place or a bigger street. Andrew pulled out his phone as he crept along and tried opening one of the apps. It was strange. Even though it showed its normal screen, it seemed to flicker every time he touched it. Andrew slowed down even more, then came to a complete stop. The last thing he needed right now was for his tires to leave the road and get stuck. That would really fuck up his plans for tonight. He turned on the emergency lights, then finally gave his full attention to the phone in his hand. He touched the screen again with his finger. A slight surge of electricity tickled his skin, and the small device started to vibrate softly. The screen glitched and went black before turning bright white. Then, suddenly, a hiss came out of the device, and he dropped it down between his legs. A tiny wisp of smoke was rising up, followed by the stench of burned plastic that seemed to fill the whole car in under a second. He heard the thing hissing again and immediately stepped on it as he ripped open the door of his car. Andrew had seen videos of phones exploding. Fireballs shooting up from the battery, melting plastic and burning skin. He opened the seatbelt and jumped out of the car, only daring to look back when more than 2 steps were between himself and the device. It was smoking softly, hissing slightly, but there was no fire, no explosion. Still, he didn't dare move any closer. Instead, Andrew turned toward the side of the road and picked up an old, rotten branch off the ground. He could still hear it hissing in there, and now saw the mat in front of the driver's seat starting to smolder. With a curse, Andrew shot forward, angled for the phone with his stick, and got it out with a flick of his wrist. It clattered over the dark asphalt, now letting off a thin trail of smoke that looked like pure soot in the lights of his car. Andrew threw his head back and stared up into the sky. He wanted to scream out of frustration. What else could go wrong tonight? Now he needed to get a new phone as well. How long would that take? Well, he couldn't do his job without one, which meant he would need to organize a replacement tonight. He took a deep breath, then another, before kicking the smoldering phone off the asphalt and onto the shoulder of the road. There was no way to take it with him anyway, and he really didn't want to wait an hour for it to finish smoking and hissing. Andrew turned away, then heard a new sound and suddenly stopped. It was almost a hiss again, but somehow different. Darker. He looked back at the device that was giving off one last trail of smoke before falling silent as a dark liquid extinguished the flame. Andrew felt a cold chill as he watched the black water running past the phone and flowing onto the asphalt. In the emergency light of his car, it almost looked like oil, but it moved differently. Far too fluidly, to be exact. Andrew took a step back before the liquid could reach him and looked around and could see that stuff rising everywhere. All along the road, black liquid seemed to build up and flow onto the asphalt, running into the cracks and forming small pools in the potholes. It was coming from both sides. Andrew took a few steps back, then turned and ran for his car. This liquid looked dangerous. Something was off about it, his instincts warned. It was already under his car as he managed to jump in and shut the door behind him. Andrew watched through his windshield as the dark liquid covered the whole road with no sign of stopping. There had to be some kind of chemical plant close by. Maybe an accident had happened there. Andrew stuck the key into the ignition, pressed the button to start the engine, and heard it growl, then stutter, then die. He looked around, cursed, and then put his finger on the start once more. Again, the engine came to life with a growl, and suddenly died down. What the hell was going on here? His car, old though it was, had never had any problems starting. The black liquid filled the road completely, and Andrew could see ripples and tiny waves forming on its surface. His emergency lights were still burning. He took out the key, put it in, and pressed the button. This time, the engine only growled before dying again. Andrew looked to the side. The roots of the trees along the road were all covered by the black stuff already. And it was rising. He could see the liquid slowly climbing up and tiny new waves coming in. His car still wasn't starting. What should he do? Andrew looked behind. The part of the road he had come from was filling up as well. This liquid was everywhere. What if it started flooding his car? He knew this vehicle wasn't waterproof. If it got in, would it be dangerous? Andrew opened his window just a crack and tried smelling the air outside. There were no fumes, at least as far as he could see. No distinct odor either. What was going on here? He heard the liquid reach the bottom of his door and felt a cold chill as he looked down and saw the first droplets seeping in through the cracks. It was rising fast, much faster than he had thought it would. Andrew tried to start the car one last time, but now the engine didn't even make a sound. He pulled his feet up from the pedals and watched the first few drops run along the floor of his car. Dark stains appeared. What was this stuff? Where was it coming from, and how should he handle it? Would it be okay to step into, or would it burn his flesh off? He could see more and more droplets running in, looked over, and watched the same thing happen to the passenger side door. It was coming in. With his car no longer starting and the stuff even entering the vehicle, what could he do? All his instincts screamed at Andrew to keep away from the liquid, to not let it touch him, even if it had neither odor nor displayed any sign of being toxic. It wasn't just water. It was something else. His hand shot out and pressed a button to lower his windows. If the stuff got high enough to enter there, it would be too late for him anyway, he reasoned. It was better to give himself a way out if that happened. He looked outside and could see the black liquid clearly in the lights of his car. It reminded him of an ocean at night. Ripples and waves were running back and forth as it continued rising, filling the whole area. Would his car start to float away? The thought disturbed him. What if the liquid was flammable? How long before there was a spark and the whole area went up in flames? Andrew could see his legs trembling. That explosion would tear a hole into the area. No, he had to stay calm, he told himself, and saw a puddle forming around the pedals of the car. There was no sign of it being flammable or anything like that. Wouldn't such liquids give off fumes? Still, he watched the black stuff pooling down there and felt it again. This dread, as if someone was whispering in his ear to be afraid. It would harm him if he touched it, hurt him. The stuff was dangerous. He felt it deep inside. Andrew put his head out of the window and looked around. The night sky above was as calm and clear as before. There were no lights besides those of his car. No signs of anyone coming along. Where were the other people? After such a spill, someone had to have called the authorities, right? Shouldn't there be news helicopters around? Emergency services? Rescue missions for people caught in the liquid? Andrew cried out for help and heard his voice disappear into the night. There was no echo, no nothing. He screamed again, even louder. Not a single sound came back. There weren't even birds or insects around making noise. He looked down and found the liquid already reaching up to the pedals. It was still rising, still coming closer with every passing second. Andrew held his head out of the open window and screamed for a third time. His voice disappeared once more, and even worse, he had the distinct impression that the black liquid surrounding him was sucking in the sounds. The ripples forming around the car were welling up in the rhythm of his breathing. He let out a shout, and bigger waves seemed to spring up from the deep. Was that real? Andrew could feel his heart racing out of control. This liquid, it wasn't like anything he had ever seen before. If it did swallow his sounds, how far would his voice even reach? Probably not even to the freeway. Unless someone stumbled upon him by pure chance, he would be completely on his own. Andrew looked to the front of the car and could see that the liquid was already covering his number plate. Not long until it reached the lights. Everything around him would go dark. Andrew knew, and a thought made him shiver. Would it be the same once the liquid rose above his car and swallowed him? No, it would be a different kind of hell. His instinct screamed at him to not let that happen. The black liquid was running into his car, and Andrew looked at the footwell again. Completely covered When would it finally stop rising? It couldn't go on like this for another hour, right? He felt his teeth chattering and grabbed hold of the car's frame above the window. With the liquid continuing to rise, this place would soon be plunged into darkness, and Andrew didn't want to be stuck in his car, fumbling around to get out without light. He angled his body and slowly moved from the seat. All he needed to do was get onto the roof of his vehicle. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best thing he could do right now. Maybe the liquid would stop soon on its own. Maybe it would continue to rise. Whatever the case was, he felt like he needed to leave the interior of the car to give himself a better chance at surviving this strange ordeal. Andrew pulled himself up until his knee touched the frame of the window. The air felt stale outside his car. He looked down, and a sudden sense of vertigo gripped him. With the black liquid covering everything, it felt like he was staring into an endless abyss. If he slipped and fell, he would never touch the ground. A part of him warned. It would swallow him up, suffocate his screams, and drag him down further and further until he lost himself completely in the darkness. Andrew shook his head. His heart was racing. He was sweating, and the shaking of his hands and feet could no longer be ignored. Black liquid was still streaming into his car and was now covering the footwell completely. He needed to move, he told himself. Thinking about useless things wasn't helping. Both of his hands gripped the top of the frame as he slowly stretched his head and shoulders out of the window. He felt a sudden pain in his back and cursed himself for letting himself go this much. If only he had joined the gym these past few years, like he had promised himself he would do. No. He turned around until his back was to the black liquid. Criticizing himself right now wasn't helpful. It wouldn't make what he was doing here any easier. Andrew slowly stretched his upper body and let go with one hand, instead putting it on the roof of his car. Normally, this should be easy, he knew. It wasn't like he was climbing a cliff, but the feeling of the black liquid in his back made every move feel dangerous. All of his fingers were trembling, his palms were sweaty, his heart was racing, and his lungs seemed to yearn for air, even though he was breathing normally. One slip, and he would be dead. His instinct screamed at him. The sheen of sweat on his hand made the roof of the car feel like a sheet of ice. He couldn't hold on to anything up there. Andrew fumbled around for something to grab and finally found the edge of the windshield at the side. It should be enough, he told himself, yet he didn't dare to move immediately. What if his finger slipped off? He would fall back, scream, and then die. There was a giant lump in his throat. He tested his grip, found it adequate, and let go of the upper frame of the window with his other hand, slowly rising up while stretching out his arm. The liquid was still streaming in. He didn't need to look back to know it. Andrew could feel it now so clearly. Holding onto the frame of the windshield, he slowly tried to stand up. Beneath his soles, the door started to groan. Never before had he put his full weight on this part of his car. What if the door's hinges broke? Well, he already knew the answer to that question, and it made the hair on the nape of his neck stand up. Andrew moved more quickly now. The groaning was quiet, almost inaudible, and he knew that the black liquid had something to do with that as well. It was swallowing all the noise touching it, even while the door was aching under his weight. Andrew held on tightly as he pulled up a leg. It felt like the frame would be cutting into his fingers any second now. His palms hurt, as did the muscles up and down his arms. With his whole body shaking, a whimper escaped his throat. He prayed in his mind that he wouldn't slip. Andrew's leg reached the roof of the car, and he felt the strain on his arms lessening. It was working, he dared to think, then turned his head and looked at the liquid below. The surface was quiet, but he knew it was still rising. Never before in his life had he stared into something this disturbing. He could feel his whole body tensing up. It wanted to swallow him, to drag him down into unspeakable depths where no light was shining. Andrew forced himself to close his eyes, pushed his foot off the frame of the window, and swung it up. With a thud, he landed on the roof of the car, still holding onto the edge, as if he could start slipping any moment now. No, he was safe. At least that was what he told himself. Yet, all the while, his instinct screamed at him that he was still in mortal danger. Andrew pressed his forehead against the cold roof of the car and felt his hot breath heating up the metal. As if to prove his point, the light below started to dim a bit. It wouldn't have been noticeable if he hadn't been in such a heightened state of panic. But he could see it immediately. Somehow, he even felt it. It was like a sudden chill crawling through his whole body. The liquid had reached the height of the lights. Soon, it would swallow them up completely. Andrew raised his head and looked across the car's hood. A black ocean spread out behind it, and the light seemed to slowly dim more and more with every passing second. He could feel his heart racing at the realization. Slight ripples were disturbing the surface up front, and their movement made the light throw big shadows. It looked like they were dancing. Andrew forced himself to stop staring out there and instead pushed himself forward a bit until he could look into the interior of the car through the windshield. The black liquid was already up to the seats. If he had remained in there, it would have touched him by now. A dark, ominous tension seemed to grip him and made breathing hard. Maybe he would have died. Maybe something worse might have happened. Andrew shook his head. He shouldn't think about it, he told himself. Whatever might have happened was completely irrelevant. The only thing he should concentrate on is how to get out of this situation. He looked around the area, which seemed much darker than before. Besides his car, he could see trees standing off in the distance. They were higher than his vehicle and would probably last longer, but they were too far away for him. If he tried to jump, he wouldn't even make it halfway. And even if he somehow did, grabbing hold of them would be impossible without slipping and falling. This here, his vehicle, was his only safe space. Andrew felt another chill and slowly pushed himself up. Lying on the roof of the car didn't help either right now. He found himself completely trapped. The light dimmed again, then flickered, and for a single moment, Andrew thought he knew what death would feel like. A cold hand seemed to grip his heart as the headlights started to quake. Something else was going on there. They should still work, he told himself. The electronics of the car hadn't stopped for now. He could see the light inside the vehicle shining brightly. But the headlights up front flickered again. Would he find himself in complete darkness soon? The thought made him shiver. He got up on his knees, then stood up. The area around was covered in the black liquid. At the front of the car, the lights flickered one last time, then turned off. Andrew felt a shiver running through his whole body. A soft breeze blew by. Only a single source of light remained. The lamp in the vehicle's interior, shining through the windshield. How long until it too got extinguished? Andrew looked at the stars above. They too seemed far weaker than normal, he thought with a frown. It felt like the world was ending, like it got swallowed by this black liquid. A soft rumbling went through the vehicle he was now standing on. He could feel it in the soles of his feet. Like an earthquake, Andrew thought, and corrected himself. No. Was this from the liquid slowly lifting the car? Would it start drifting off? He looked around behind the vehicle, but could see nothing besides the black liquid and the darkness of the night. What if it started to move? He could do nothing against that. He tried to calm himself. All he could do was try and stay atop the car and hope it wouldn't turn over. Andrew felt another quake and turned to look at the hood of his car. The light from the yellow interior lamp illuminated it. Dark liquid was slowly beginning to rise above it. He could feel a stinging pain in his heart as he noticed. Was it climbing up more quickly now? Shouldn't it get slower the higher the liquid rises? For a third time, the car beneath his feet trembled, but as he looked, the liquid surrounding him didn't show any more signs of ripples forming. Something else was going on here. His instincts warned. Something he couldn't see. Andrew turned around once more. There were no ripples or waves anywhere. And yet, suddenly, the car shifted beneath his feet. It was the back of the vehicle, turning, that made him stumble and almost fall. Andrew felt pure panic as his hand touched the metal roof of the car, and he shot around to look at his surroundings. The weak yellow light from inside the car showed neither ripples nor waves, but this time he was sure it hadn't been some kind of quake. No, something had touched the vehicle, shoved it. He was sure of it. Andrew looked at the calm surface of the still rising black liquid. Something inside of him stirred, a primal kind of fear. The front of the car suddenly surged to the side, and Andrew fell backwards onto the hood. He stretched out his hands immediately, found the corner at the side, and held on for dear life. Something was in the dark liquid. There was no longer any doubt about that. It attacked again without warning, pushing the side of the car, and Andrew almost slipped over the edge. He couldn't see it, not even in the yellow light of the lamp. It moved down there, in the darkness, completely silent without disturbing the surface at all. Was this what his instincts had screamed about? Not that strange black water, but whatever was hidden in it. Andrew got back to his knees and steadied himself by grabbing both sides of the roof. The thing hit the car again, made it lurch forward and shook the whole chassis. The black liquid still swallowed almost all the sounds, but he could feel the vibration through the metal. It was here, this thing, slowly pushing the car. Black water reached the outside of the windshield, and Andrew found himself on what felt like a tiny island, surrounded by a deadly ocean. The only difference was that his island was moving. Andrew held on as best he could, then felt another jolt as the car was shoved in the opposite direction. The yellow light inside seemed to flicker. Or was that just his panic? His fingers dug into the frame above the window. He groaned and almost whimpered. How quick was this thing in there? Or was there more than one? He had no idea what it even looked like. Andrew wanted to scream for help, but knew deep down that any noise he made would only worsen the situation. The black water reached the open window by the driver's seat and flooded his car with a whoosh. Another shove moved the vehicle, and Andrew felt a stinging pain in his fingers. The light below flickered. This time, there was no doubt. He could feel the terror filling his mind, pushing out all the other thoughts. Light. He needed light. But there was nothing he could do. The car got shoved again and moved to the side while he held on for dear life. Inside, the light disappeared, then reappeared in less than a second. The water was still rising, and the only ripples he could now see on its surface were from the movements of his car. Below him, the yellow light began to flicker, and this time it happened without another attack. Andrew could see it and almost felt it. It had the same rhythm as his racing heartbeat. He wanted to scream and cry, but his mouth didn't open. The light, it kept him safe. The flickering got faster and faster. He could see the shadows dancing on the black liquid. Above, the stars seemed to dim and vanish until suddenly everything stopped. For a single moment, the light below shone brighter than ever before, illuminated the whole area, and then, without warning, died and disappeared. Andrew found himself lying on the roof of his car in complete darkness. His heart was racing, his mind was in turmoil, the tips of his fingers hurt, as did his arms. Any moment now, the next attack would come. He would try to shake him off the roof. He would die the second his body touched the water. And there was nothing he could do about that. Andrew looked around and almost felt his heart stopping. He could see it. Below the black water, red dots. Eyes. They were staring up at him, all around his car. Dozens, no, hundreds of these things were down below, looking at him. Their eyes were burning with this intense fire. Andrew felt it before he could see it. A shift went through them. They moved, all of them in unison, rushed forward and made a wave. Andrew screamed as he felt the side of his car lift up, then turn. He was thrown into the air and could see the red eyes below him, still staring at him. His heart almost stopped. Gravity pulled him down again, and the world seemed to disappear as cold black waves swallowed him whole. Someone touched his arm. Softly at first, then a bit rougher, and Andrew opened his eyes. It was bright outside. He was lying on the shoulder of the road, and someone was carefully shaking him awake. Andrew still couldn't fully understand. The person tried to talk to him, but he pushed himself off the cold and dusty ground. His mind was fuzzy, slow, and somehow disjointed. He knew where he was, or at least he had a rough idea, but parts seemed to be missing. Something had happened here. But what? With a rough shove, he pushed the person off of him and came staggering to his feet. Voices were whispering all around. They were calling out to him. He looked up at the sky, then at his surroundings. The other person was still talking, but he couldn't concentrate on them. A car was lying on its side by the road. Andrew felt nothing as he saw it. Deep inside of him, this fire was burning. He could feel something dripping from his nose, and as he wiped it away, he could see the black, oily streak it left on his skin. Andrew felt his lips forming into a smile. He had somewhere to be, he told himself, turned toward the trees, and started to run.